Denise Gwen, reading aloud for you from my novel, His Christmas Eve Proposal, Book 3 of The Medicine Women of Alaska, Chapter 30. She couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed better, more intimate, more deeply and emotionally moving lovemaking. The last time she'd experienced something even close to this had been the first time she and Ricardo made love. But on the night before their aborted wedding, they'd had sex. She'd been under a lot of stress at the time, and the sex hadn't been very enjoyable. But this lovemaking with Drew, it was off the charts. Drew did things to her that she'd never experienced with any other lover. He touched her all over. He kissed her neck. He kissed her shoulders. He kissed her hips, her belly button, and he did all this before, while, and during their lovemaking. It was glorious. Sex had never been a big deal for her. Her friends raved over it, and yes, with Ricardo, some of their sexual interludes had been really nice, but not one of them reached the level of the mind-blowing orgasm that she'd just experienced with Drew. Now she understood what her friends had been saying. After their first lovemaking, she climbed out of bed and her legs wobbled as she walked to the bathroom, nearly toppling her over. "Are you okay?" Drew asked, instantly on his feet. "I'm fine," she said and laughed. "I just can't walk." "Well, let me take care of that for you," he said, and hurried around to her side of the bed and swept her off her feet again and carried her to the bathroom. She laughed. "Where to?" he asked. "The toilet," she said, and he placed her gently upon the toilet and left her alone. She quivered all over, a sensation she'd never experienced before in her life. She finished, washed her hands, and hopped back into bed. This was what she'd wanted all along. This was what'd been leading up to all her emotions in the moments before she kissed him. She wanted to escape from the trouble of the world because she knew full well that when the press descended upon Gnometown, she'd get all kinds of coverage, and she doubted that any of it would be favorable. After all, she was the girl who'd abandoned Ricardo Velazquez at the altar, and then, 9 months later, here she was inserting a chest tube into his body. And if for some terrible reason or another he failed to survive the surgery, she'd be in trouble. She could see it now, the tabloids, the headlines. It'd haunt her for the remainder of her life. And that's when it hit her, the realization. I have to leave Gnometown. I may have been able to stay before, but now I have to leave. This knowledge made her sicker than the experience of seeing Ricardo Velazquez again, for she knew what it meant. She wanted to be with Drew. He was her man, but she had to leave Gnometown right now. She had to go someplace perhaps even more remote than Gnometown and set her life anew. Well, That settled it then. She'd leave. But for now, for the time that she found herself with her Drew, she'd enjoy her last few fleeting hours with him in his warm, cozy bed. Naomi snuggled up against Drew, and he drew the coverlet over her and tucked her in. He immediately began kissing her, starting from her forehead and slowly kissing his way down her body. She tingled with excitement. "Are you too tired to go on?" he asked. "No, keep going," she said. "Good," he said, "because I don't want to stop." He kissed the sweet spot on her neck and kissed her down her shoulder, and she let out an involuntary groan and her back arched. Her entire body was alive and sentient and very keyed into this man. He reached her breasts and kissed and circled his tongue around her sweet peaks, then continued to her inner thigh. "Make love to me again," a request that is easily satisfied. She helped sheathe him, and then he entered her, and as he did so, she gasped with surprise and dug her nails into his arms as he began the rhythmic movement of his pelvis. Little by little, she was carried away in a rushing river of passion that ebbed and swelled until at last she threw her head back and screamed in ecstasy. She melted into him as he wrapped her into his arms, drawing her close from behind, and they fell asleep in each other's arms. Later in the night, she awoke and watched the man who'd captured her heart. Drew's eyes opened and he gazed at her with love. "I don't want to leave," she said. "I'd rather you didn't. Stay the night." She murmured. "When the season changes," he said, rolling over onto his back, "I'm taking you up north to see the northern lights." "You are, huh?" "Yep. And we can climb into our zip-together sleeping bag and watch the miraculous sight together." She snuggled up against him. "Will we? Well then, that sounds good." "I thought it would," he said with satisfaction. "Only I need to leave here, and I can't tell him. And we'll live here in my snug cabin, and we'll use the hot tub every night." "That sounds good," she said, while inwardly fretting. She had to leave Gnometown right away before the press got wind of her presence. Before she fell so far in love with him, there'd be no turning back. "Spend the rest of the weekend with me?" he asked. A tremor of terror rippled through her. She was not going to be able to leave Gnometown. "Are you hungry?" he asked with a teasing smile. "I'm famished," she said. "Okay, then. I'd better rustle up some grub. After all, I want to keep this hot lady well fed so she has the energy to engage in hours upon hours of lovemaking." "Oh, how you talk." How in the world was she ever going to escape from Gnometown?